All right, GM everyone, welcome to Gasless, a podcast that explores the multi-chain world of crypto and Web3. Are L2s good or bad for Ethereum? On one hand, you could say it helps scale Ethereum, but on the other hand, you could see a major chunk of all economic activity migrate from Ethereum L1 to its Layer 2s, which would end up hurting the Ethereum token holder down the line. Someone who's been a bit vocal about this lately is Meher Roy, the co-founder and CTO of Chorus One. It's not easy to be outspoken with opinions that go against the current, but that's one of the best parts of crypto because it's made up of a free market of ideas. Yeah, so I think it would be nice to start with how does someone who started off in the pharmaceutical space encounter crypto and go on to start a company in the space?
Yeah. So I guess the Bitcoin bug hit me. So in my history is I studied biotechnology, worked in the vaccines industry for 7 years. And in 2011, I came across Bitcoin. And when I read about Bitcoin the first time in The Economist, I was very convinced. I was kind of convinced about Bitcoin already at the first reading. And I remember I sent in an order in 2011 to transfer around $3,000 to Mt. Gox from India.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that was the billionaire trade. And my Indian bank refused to send the money to Mt. Gox in Japan.
I see.
Because in the forum they had asked, why do you want to send money? And I had said to buy Bitcoin, and then they had judged as per Indian regulations that this was not an authorized use of banking services. And so I ran into a hurdle, and kind of Bitcoin was kind of like a hobby thing. I was, of course, like tertiary or quaternary thing I was doing at that point. So when I ran into the hurdle, I didn't pursue it. And so that's how I missed my billionaire trade. So kind of, although I couldn't invest into Bitcoin back then, I followed Bitcoin along, and in 2013 there was a run up in price. So it went to I think $66 or something like that. And then my fiance came to me and told me about it, and I was like, oh no, this is too overvalued. I'm not going to buy it. And then 7 months later, it was at $1,000. And then my friend came to me and like $1,000. Then I was like, oh, I have to look at it in depth again. And so I started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, deep into the rabbit hole since I think November 2013. And what I kind of realized back then is when I was in the vaccines industry, and I knew that the outcome of any career is actually dependent on three forces. One is how well you do in the organization you are in. But the other two forces are how well does the organization you are in do in the market. And the third thing is how well does the industry your organization is in does overall.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this notion that, okay, my career is actually not a sum of just my hard work, but it's a sum of these three vectors, or these three things actually.
Yeah.
And I already had the notion that, okay, the vaccines industry overall is not a very fast growing industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started diving into Bitcoin, what kind of struck me about like the cryptocurrency industry more broadly is kind of the idea that this is a technology space where the hardware distribution costs are zero. So normally, whenever a new technology breaks out into society, you have to build a lot of hardware. Imagine virtual reality. Well, you have to build virtual reality headsets, maybe 20 billion of them, and distribute them to everyone. And they have to pay for it for virtual reality to go mainstream. Or imagine electric cars. You have to build so many charging stations and so many new cars for that technology to go mainstream. But in crypto, all the hardware is already distributed. That's the mobiles and laptops and desktops of the world. So hardware distribution cost is zero. Then the second thing is I started to realize back then is the target market is massive. Now, back in those days, we used to think of the target market of Bitcoin as being the monetary supply of the world. And so you could imagine that, 100 trillion, you have a target market of 100 trillion. And back then, like, I don't know, $100 million Bitcoin market cap. And you could see target market is massive. Target market is massive because finance is massive. And I think for me, the third big realization came, the realization that completely convinced me is when Vitalik Buterin in Miami conference in January of 2014 came out with the idea of smart contracts. And so when I saw smart contracts, I was like, oh, this is the basis for essentially all the derivatives of the world. And where derivatives are, you realize that, actually you're going to disrupt Wall Street because you can do contracts and you can do derivatives. And so my target market at that point grew beyond like just money and to be like, okay, we are actually going to disrupt Wall Street with this technology. So you have a technology which is purely software, no hardware distribution cost with a huge target market. And then the other structural factor you realize in cryptocurrency is because the entire technology stack is sort of open source, evolution happens faster. Like failed ideas are discovered faster, variations of failed ideas emerge more quickly as a result, product market fit is discovered more quickly. So fast evolving technology, massive target market, zero hardware distribution costs. So my kind of sense was that this will be ultimately like a faster growing industry than vaccines. And so I made at that time the crazy bet to completely switch gears into it. I had no background in economics or computer science.
Wow.
I'm not a programmer at that time. So yeah, I had to learn everything from the ground up. It took me like 3 years to do it, and then eventually like started Chorus 1. And when I look back, the decision is right, because even if I just look at my personal portfolio, even in the bear market today, if you take my starting point in 2014 to the bear market today, my personal portfolio has grown at something like 90% compounded per year.
Yeah.
And the vaccines industry grows at like 5% or 4% per year.
Yeah.
So I'm really optimizing, the third direction here. It's like your career is dependent on your effort, your organization's effort,
Yeah.
but also how successful the industry is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I ended up here.
Which probably a lot of young people may not consider the point about, even if you calculate your effort, what is the probability of the industry in which you're in might affect your trajectory on a professional level. And with blockchains and crypto essentially being like leapfrog technology, that kind of allows you to make these exponential growth. Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
think that, yeah, go ahead.
maybe one way to think of it is, so I've learned some sailing, so like, which is like driving a boat on the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do sailing, you realize that, okay, in sailing, you have to capture the energy of the wind to propel you forward. So what determines how fast you go? At one level, it's your sailing skill, how good you yourself are at managing the boat. But at the other level, it depends on the boat itself, how well the boat is constructed for speed.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, you are dependent on the wind, right? So
Yeah.
if the wind is not blowing fast, you won't go fast, no matter how good your boat is, no matter how good you are. So it's like the wind is like the industry and its growth. The boat is like the organization you're working for, how good it is built. And then you are the, salesman or sailor
Yeah.
of your boat, which is
Yeah.
your own effort, how well you do. So yeah,
So that,
there are many activities which can be thought of like this.
which is a very good segue, because I think if you drill down to what is happening at a micro level within the crypto space, is probably what triggered your opinion on Ethereum's roadmap recently, right? Because
Yeah.
it also speaks to, how is this industry, what are the choices that Ethereum has made that might affect certain trajectories for people involved in it, particularly the token holders. So yeah, I think let's dive in and try to maybe talk about like what triggered yourself to be vocal about it, and maybe if you want to sort of set the stage, set the context as to why you did it, and let's dive into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So actually I've been an Ether holder for now 7 years. It's my most successful investment.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this network's journey from up close. And that, like, this recent roadmap, which is focused on L2s, it is very radical. And first, I want to explain why it is radical.
Yeah.
So one way to think of it is, maybe we can actually think of a spectrum, a line with two different ends, and on one line, on this line, at one extreme end, you can place sort of two systems, which are like Solana and Polkadot at one extreme end. And at the other extreme end, you can actually place Cosmos.
Okay.
And first, we will talk about these other systems. Then we will place Ethereum on this line. And you'll understand why the recent roadmap is kind of radical.
Okay.
So let's first think of something like a Polkadot first.
All right.
So in Polkadot, what happens is, there's a central chain which is called the relay chain. It has a set of validators. And then what people can do is, if they want to launch their own blockchain, they can go to the relay chain, tell the relay chain, hey, I want my own blockchain. Here's the code for my blockchain. create a blockchain for me, and the validators of that central chain will take your code and they will build a new blockchain for you. And this new blockchain will have a certain transaction processing capacity. And these chains are called parachains. It originates from parallel chains, but parachains. So in this ecosystem, what essentially happens is anytime a DeFi project succeeds in the Polkadot ecosystem, it's running on infrastructure which is sort of controlled by or dictated by the central chain,
Okay.
which is the relay chain. So imagine the two of us do a startup and we go and build a startup on Polkadot and we do it in one of these parachains, and our startup becomes really big. So let's say we start to handle, I don't know, $1 trillion per month in exchange volume. There's lots of transaction fees. Because we are running on a Polkadot parachain, some of the transaction fees and MEV, they are actually earned by the validators of Polkadot proper, because it's the validators of Polkadot proper that are running our infrastructure.
Yeah.
The infrastructure for our DeFi startup.
Yeah.
Right? So in this case, what happens is, okay, if we become part of the Polkadot ecosystem and we build a massively successful DeFi enterprise in the Polkadot ecosystem, because our infrastructure is run by the validators of the central Polkadot chain, dot holders will benefit.
Okay.
So we can have our own token, and our own token holders can benefit from certain kinds of fees we levy, but dot token holders will also benefit. So whatever economic activity we create, that cake of that economic activity is going to be split between the dot holders and the holders of our token.
Yeah.
Right? This is by design how Polkadot runs.
But is it only channeled to dot holders who stake their dot?
Is it only channeled? Yes.
Okay. All right.
So I mean, no, actually no.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's like there's a distinction here out. I would say it is channeled to dot holders that stake dot, but the official Polkadot docs will state otherwise. And I think they
Okay.
state otherwise because they are mistaken. They are mistaken about the economics of the system
Okay.
they are building.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
yeah.
But let's not
All
get
right.
yeah.
Let's not
yeah,
get
that's
tied up
probably
there.
too much
Yeah.
of a detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think of Solana is also like Polkadot actually. So in Solana, what happens is, what Solana says is, Polkadot says, oh, by nature, there's going to be multiple chains in the ecosystem. And currently in the Polkadot ecosystem, there's around 17 chains.
Yeah.
The central chain and like 16
Parachains.
parallel chains. Yeah, parachains. Now in the Solana ecosystem, Solana's big tagline is no sharding.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of this tagline, they are like, oh no, single chain, single monster giant chain,
Yeah.
not 17 or 18 or 100 chains. That's no sharding tagline.
Yeah.
The idea here is, okay, there's a bunch of validators in Solana, and the Solana software is so designed that these validators can scale up transaction throughput very gracefully.
Uh-huh.
So the nature of Solana is that if you have, it has 1,800 validators, and these validators today don't run any GPUs. But basically, if they add a GPU, if each validator adds a GPU to their setup, they can add some, tens of thousands of transactions per second in capacity.
Mm-hmm.
If they add 2 of them, they will double that extra capacity. If they add 3 of them, triple. If they add 20 of them, they can increase capacity 20 times.
Okay.
The problem, of course, is that when you have massive capacity, like 100,000 transactions a second, you need to place your validator in a good data center. You cannot run it out of home. That's the constraint Solana accepts.
Yeah.
But accepting that constraint, it has like the scaling strategy where it can basically scale to huge transaction throughput just by adding like GPUs to validators and placing them in good data centers. And then anyone can come and build their dApp as a program on top of Solana. But so let's say the two of us are building a program on Solana, then it's similar to Polkadot. Our experience is actually similar to Polkadot, right? So we don't get our own chain, but as such, our transactions are run by the Solana validators. And if our DeFi app succeeds a lot, well, the cake is going to be split in the future in some way between SOL holders and the holders of our token.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So in both of these ecosystems, you notice something that's happening. It's like whenever a DeFi project succeeds massively, the SOL or the DOT holders get a part of that cake.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why they are at one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
At the other end of the let's go to the other end of the
All right.
spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is Cosmos. So what happens in Cosmos is at Cosmos they have like open source software which anyone can use to build their own blockchain. Right? This software is called Cosmos SDK and Tendermint. And anyone can build their own chain. So if we go and build a DeFi app on Cosmos, we will probably build our own chain.
Okay.
And we will find our own set of validators.
Okay.
And all of the transaction fees and rewards of our economic growth will accrue to basically sort of our token, the token we are creating. And this is true for every DeFi app on Solana. Every DeFi app basically gets its own chain. And then there's a communication protocol called IBC, where
you mean this is true for Cosmos, right?
Cosmos, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, Cosmos. So every DeFi app gets its own chain on Cosmos. Each chain has its own validator set. The benefits of the fees and transaction fees and extra, all of the fees accrue to the individual tokens that are running the chains.
Got it.
And then there is a what is called a cross-chain communication protocol, which is IBC, where if a user wants to interact with two applications which are on different chains, they can use that protocol to interact. So you see, in Cosmos, there is no natural token which benefits from the success of all DeFi apps in the Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah.
There is none. So this is the other end of the spectrum. So Cosmos is a system where I would almost say there is no L1 at all. There is no central infrastructure token. Every DeFi project builds its own infrastructure and derives the benefit of running its own infrastructure. There is no L1 token that you can actually analyze. So, like that's the spectrum. On one end, you have L1 tokens with very good value capture mechanisms for their L1 token holders, SOL and DOT. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have Cosmos, where there is no L1 token. And And then there is no central value capture mechanism at all in that ecosystem. Now with that background, if you can imagine this line, now you can actually place Ethereum on that line. So Ethereum started out in 2015, in 2014. So in 2014, Ethereum did not have a scaling strategy. Ethereum was like, we'll do smart contracts. And they had this abstract promise, we will scale or we will die trying.
Yeah.
They made it to Peter Todd. Vitalik made it to Peter Todd in a tweet back then. But there wasn't a good scaling strategy. And then a lot of different ideas were proposed.
Yeah.
Hypercubes and X and Y and Z. And then like the idea that they settled on was the idea of sharding.
Yeah.
And actually sharding at one level actually looks a lot like Polkadot. In fact, if you want to understand historical Ethereum sharding, study Polkadot sharding and you'll realize that those two things are brothers.
Mm.
If you understand one, you'll understand the other.
Mm-hmm.
So Ethereum's thing was, okay, well, Polkadot did a lot of inventions on that sharding idea, but they're similar concepts, and the basic idea in Ethereum is, Ethereum sharding is, okay, there's going to be a central chain, the beacon chain, and then there's going to be like 64 shards, but the validators of that central beacon chain run all of these 64 shards.
Yeah.
And if needed in the future, you can go from 64 to 128, etc. But it's the same validator set running all of these shards. And if you want to deploy a dApp on this sharded Ethereum, then you can deploy it in one of the shards, and then the benefits of the economic activity you produce will be split between the ETH holder and the token holder that's creating that DeFi app. So its original idea would be something like, okay, you have Uniswap, majorly successful. It would be on the central beacon chain. Well, in that traditional sharding roadmap, in the future, it would move from the beacon chain to one of the shards, let's say shard 37.
All right.
It would grow majorly on shard 37, and then when you see Uniswap, well, it produces MEV, it produces transaction fees, and it produces liquidity fees. Liquidity fees would go to the Uni token holders. Transaction fees and MEV would go to the ETH holders. While Uniswap is operating on shard 37.
Okay.
That was the basic concept.
Okay.
You can see this is like this is actually Polkadot almost, with one key difference. Polkadot does not have prescription that there will be 64 shards. They can be as many as people come along and build chains.
Okay.
Ethereum, it was centrally planned, 64 shards, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when the roadmap was like that, the benefits for the Ethereum holder were kind of like quite clear. And it was on the Polkadot Solana side of the spectrum. Now things have changed. So now like Ethereum is not doing sort of execution sharding. So what's really happening is Ethereum's going to the Cosmos vision almost. It's going to the other end of the spectrum, where what Ethereum's really saying is, well, we have this beacon chain, this chain. Any community can come and build their infrastructure, which they are calling L2s. And you can think of these L2s as really like independent chains or sovereign chains, because they have their own token, they have their own validator sets. And let's say like I go and run a validator for the Starkware chain. Well, I answer to the Starkware token holders, not the ETH holders.
Yeah.
So you can see why it is like Cosmos.
Is it true for all L2s that everyone will have their own set of validators?
Right. So out here, there's an idea in the Ethereum community that every chain will not need to build a large set of validators. They are imagining that some of the L2s will just be, centralized servers, a single server or server run by one party, processing lots of transactions and then somehow settling onto Ethereum. I think the problem that they are going to run into there is like a regulatory problem. So imagine I'm running one of these. Let's just say I'm myself, like the two of us are running 3 servers, 5 servers somewhere. We own all of them. We are running a blockchain. We are settling into Ethereum, but on our blockchain now, let's imagine, I don't know, an exchange is running or a payment service is running. The regulators are going to come after us immediately, right? So there is this idea, but I don't think it's a particularly tenable idea. So to actually like have a service like that, we will end up needing to have a bigger validator set, 100 validators, 150 validators. And in this day and age, it has become really easy to acquire 100 or 150 validators also. So my default assumption is all these L2s, they will need their own validator sets, not because of technological reasons, but because actually decentralization is valuable
so the
from a regulatory
trajectory
perspective.
is almost baked in.
The trajectory is almost baked in, right? Like these cannot be centralized servers, because I mean, you have money transmitter regulations to start with. If you have a centralized server and you are processing, I mean, by default, every blockchain processes payments. So if you're running a centralized server that's processing payments, well, you are a money transmitter as per US law. And if you're a money transmitter, well, you have to get licenses in all 50 US states. So this ain't going to work. What you need to do is you need to have 100, 200 validators, and you need to hope minimally that American regulations evolve in a way that validators don't end up having huge regulatory burden, right? Like that's what every blockchain is hoping, by the way, right? So now, so you can imagine this Ethereum ecosystem as, okay, Ethereum imagines itself as the L1, and then you have these L2s, lots of them, with their own validator sets and their own tokens. And so this is like the Cosmos vision now. You see why it is like that. And then in the Cosmos vision, you see what happens is every chain needs to specialize in an application. And so what Ethereum is imagining is that it is going to specialize in the application of data availability and settlement. And it is also imagining that it is going to remain like a small chain. By small chain, I mean a chain handling something like 50 transactions per second, which may double every 3 years, depending on that bandwidth skills, Nielsen's law, which is Nielsen's law for bandwidth. And it has something like transaction finality of time to finality of around 10 minutes. So it wants to remain like a small chain, and I would argue slow chain, although in the roadmap, Vitalik does say that they want to quicken it up. But Ethereum is imagining it will remain like a small chain and a slow chain. And then it is going to sell the service of data availability and settlement to all of these L2s. And that is going to be its business model in this Cosmos vision. So one way to think of Ethereum's roadmap is actually that the Ethereum and Cosmos ecosystems are merging. They started out as different ecosystems, but they are merging into one. And Ethereum is thinking that in that merger of those two ecosystems, we are going to sell the service of data availability and settlement. We can get into what these are in that large ecosystem, and we will remain a small chain, slow chain, and that will work for either one of two reasons. They imagine it working because maybe first reason is they imagine that this service of data
Uh-huh.
availability is extremely valuable, and data availability and settlement is extremely valuable. The product is very good. That is their imagination. And then the second thing is many Ethereum people are thinking, oh, people are going to think of ETH as money in this merger of ecosystems. So that's one thing. Now, crucially, what Ethereum is going for is saying that, okay, today the massively successful DeFi ecosystem that is there on top of Ethereum, which by the way is like 10x better than any other ecosystem, 10x bigger than any other ecosystem today. If you compare to Solana, Avalanche,
Yeah.
Ethereum is 10x bigger, it's more successful. Ethereum is imagining that, okay, in this merger of ecosystems, they are actively encouraging their successful DeFi projects to migrate to other chains in that ecosystem. Now, in the Ethereum community, they have a certain preference. Well, they would prefer that these projects migrate to a Starkware or a Polygon rather than, let's say, to I don't know, to an Osmosis. So they have these preferences based on political alignment. But the long story short, they part of the roadmap is they want these projects to actively migrate off into that ecosystem. So one way to think of Ethereum's roadmap now is you can think of it in terms of Aesop's fable, right? In Aesop's fable, you have this story that, okay, you have a man with a bird in his hand, and the man can eat the bird, and then the man thinks that there are two birds behind the bush, but in order to go and catch those two birds, the man has to let this bird go and fly away. So the man has dinner, but the man has to let the dinner go in order to catch those other two birds behind the bush. Ethereum is a bit like that today. So in Ethereum's hand is a majorly successful DeFi ecosystem, 10x bigger than any other DeFi ecosystem. That's the bird in hand. What Ethereum sees is, okay, if Ethereum and Cosmos get merged, then behind the bush there are two birds. One bird is, well, data availability and settlement as a product. Well, we will sell that product and we will make money there. And the second bird is, oh, people are going to think of us ETH as money. And so Ethereum is, right now going through Aesop's fable. Like, okay, it has bird in hand, two birds potentially behind the bush. Should it let this bird go in order to catch those other two birds? And Ethereum's decision, yes. The two birds behind the bush are worth the one bird in its hand.
Let's just circle back a bit.
So
when you said that they're merging with Cosmos, it means more like in similar architecture, right? Yeah. Okay. And
in similar architecture.
Yeah. Could you
in similar architecture,
why do you think they've settled on data availability and settlement as what they think will be of value? Right. And also maybe break down those two concepts a bit more.
Yeah. So one of the I shouldn't call it a problem, but one of the central concerns in a world of, like the Cosmos vision is like a world of 1 million blockchains or 1,000 blockchains. One of the central concerns in a world of 1,000 blockchains is
Yeah.
the security of the bridge. The concern is a little bit like this. Let's say like an individual chain, its failure rate is once every 100 years. So if you take a chain with 150 validators, it's not going to fail very often. 66% attacks are infrequent. So let's say they happen once in 100 years, but when you have 1,000 chains, that actually means 10 attacks per year, right? And in a million chains, more attacks per year. So in a world of many blockchains, some small percentage of blockchains are getting attacked, right? And so when these blockchains kind of connect to each other via bridges, the issue is when a blockchain gets attacked, let's say like 1,000 blockchains, blockchain 650 gets attacked. If there are assets originating from blockchain 650 and they move to some other chain, then some other chain must now deal with these assets that may be malformed, right? And so the Cosmos, traditionally in the Cosmos ecosystem, what that ecosystem has said is, yes, this will happen. We accept this will happen. And when blockchain 650 fails, Cosmos ecosystem has dealt with it in two ways. It has said, at one level, it has said, okay, when blockchain 650 fails, the other chains will be able to detect that very quickly. And the other thing that they have said is, okay, if blockchain 650 has failed and some of the assets have come onto a different blockchain, then this other blockchain, let's say blockchain 500, it has some malformed assets coming from 650. It will be able to react very quickly and freeze those assets. And then we will be able to deal with that problem and solve it, right? So that is how, like Cosmos, and in Cosmos, there's a particular bridge architecture, which is called IBC, where failures of the counterparty bridge can be detected, but before you detect that failure, some of the malformed assets could have come onto your chain, and then you will need to freeze those assets and you will need to deal with that situation. Now, Ethereum's idea is that they are introducing an even more secure form of bridge. So what will happen in this more secure form of bridge is, well, if you look at like the ZK rollup direction, in the ZK rollup direction, actually, so imagine you have Ethereum and then you have a rollup chain like Starkware. And let's say Starkware fails. It is 66% attack. Double spends have happened on that chain. Then Starkware has a bridge to Ethereum. What is very mind-blowing about this bridge architecture is Ethereum. So if you have some assets on, if the attacker gets some assets on Starkware, they will not be able to bring it on Ethereum and spend it, because Ethereum will be able to detect immediately that Ethereum will never approve that change on the Starkware side. So it's actually in scenario of an attack, it's like if you are an Ether holder that has taken assets to Starkware, you are protected. You can always come back to Ethereum with your assets. And on the other side, if some assets that are originating on Starkware have been double spent, they will find it very hard to come to Ethereum also. So what they have kind of developed is a technology for an extremely secure bridge, right? So now we have actually three types of bridges. One is something like a wormhole or axelar. That's one type of bridge. Then the IBC bridge is
Yep.
probably more secure than the
Yeah.
wormhole bridge in Cosmos today. And Ethereum is developing an even more
Yeah.
secure generation of bridges. And in developing this secure generation of bridges, one of the things is Ethereum starts to need to verify that the
Yeah.
accounting in the other chain is correct. And so Ethereum's design is more like if there's an L2 that's running, Ethereum is like continually verifying. Some of the data of that L2 is coming to Ethereum, and Ethereum is kind of like verifying either through game theoretic mechanisms or cryptographic mechanisms that the accounting in that other chain is constantly correct. And so in order to keep this verification running, it's needed
I
to
see.
develop this service of data availability, because at some level, Ethereum is like a small chain, right? Ethereum wants to be a small chain, but on the
Okay.
other side, maybe a massive chain. And so Ethereum needs to be sure that it sort of their validators have access to the entire data set of that massive chain so that they can verify that the accounting on the other chain is correct. So in developing their secure bridge architecture, they have kind of realized that, oh, data availability is extremely critical, and data availability is a service that they're offering. Now, the second assumption in the Ethereum community is that, and I actually think this assumption is wrong. The second assumption is wrong, but we'll get into why. Second assumption in the Ethereum community is that they're going to offer the service of settlement, which is that when something happens on the Starkware chain. So as a user of the Starkware chain, let's say you do a transaction on the Starkware chain, and then, like 10 minutes, let's say Starkware chain confirms it in like 5 seconds. Maybe 10 or 20 minutes later, Ethereum will also confirm that the accounting in the Starkware chain is correct. So as a user, what you will find yourself be able to do is actually send a transaction, and then you can see that the Starkware chain has confirmed it. If you wait 20 more minutes, you can see that Ethereum has confirmed it. And the Ethereum community believes that, okay, you as a user are going to value Ethereum's certification that, oh no, actually your Starkware transaction was correct. And so this is settlement, right? It's like something is happening on an L2, but you as a user are going to wait for Mr. Ethereum to say, hey, yeah, that thing went correctly, and that's like settlement. So it's really trying to say, so if you look at the Ethereum roadmap, it is like data availability is a valuable product, secure bridge is a valuable product, and settlement is a valuable product. These are the things that Ethereum is trying to sell. And it has to give up its DeFi ecosystem in return. That's the Ethereum roadmap. And the question is, the central question is that a good trade?
Yeah.
Is giving up that one bird?
But is it true that with certain categories of L2s, even the data availability and settlement assumption may not be of much value? Because I think you had briefly touched that Starkware, they'll have their own validators, and you can even do it in the home level. So essentially, what do you really need from Ethereum at that point?
Yes. So actually, this is the interesting thing is my entire thought process was kind of triggered when I went to a meetup in Zurich where Starkware was presenting. And after hearing the Starkware presentation and like thinking of the Ethereum roadmap, I was like, oh, the Ethereum roadmap doesn't make a lot of sense to me now. So first, actually, we have to understand what this Starkware infrastructure is like, because it is mind-blowing. It is mind-blowingly amazing. And once you realize how amazing it is, you'll realize why a Starkware user doesn't need to wait for Ethereum for settlement of any kind, or even data availability of any kind. So traditionally, what happens is, see, when Bitcoin came out, it came out with the idea of home mining. People are going to mine on their CPUs. And in the Bitcoin ecosystem, home mining was quickly outcompeted by professional large-scale mining in ASIC data centers. So what the Bitcoin community stuck on is, it's fine, let mining happen in the data center. Let those guys produce the blocks. Let the professionals produce the blocks. But at our homes, we will be able to kind of run the blockchain on our computers, listen to all of the transactions, and we will always be able to know if the accounting that the professionals are doing is correct or not. And in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the block size is small, because if you make the block size very large, you won't be able to you may not be able to propagate those blocks in places where internet connections are basically have smaller capacity. This is why Bitcoin needs block space to be small, right? Now essentially on the other side, so that's like one end of the spectrum. That's the Bitcoin end of the spectrum. Now on the other end of the spectrum, you have actually a chain like Solana, where what Solana says is, the feature that people will be able to verify the Solana chain at home, we don't care about it at all. So what Solana says is, okay, we're going to have professional validators. There are 1,800 of them. These guys will locate their servers in data centers in many different countries, naturally. They can process a huge amount of transactions because they can have very good internet lines. For example, I run a Solana validator as part of Chorus. We have a 25 gigabit per second line. It's over provisioned. I mean, it's over provisioned for other reasons. They don't have those many transactions coming into the chain, but we have a 25 gigabit per second line. Other validators I know have a 10 gigabit per second line. You can't get those lines at home. So in Solana, you won't be able to verify the Solana chain at your home. What's the way Solana thinks of it is, okay, now what's the danger if you can't verify the chain at home? Well, the danger is actually the validators will group together, right? And they'll attack the chain. Collusion, and they're going to attack the chain. They're going to double spend. Not only are they going to double spend, but actually people at home won't be even able to detect it, because you're not running a home node. And so if the attack is not detected, well, the community cannot actually respond. That's the problem, right? Like that detectability may become low. Now, I mean, I think like Solana's traditional answer, and the answer makes some sense. Like, it makes sense, right? Like Solana's traditional answer is, or any chain like Solana, Cosmos chains are like this also, by the way, right? So I don't want to single out Solana. Osmosis is similar. So their traditional answer is, okay, we have 1,800 validators. Even if, let's say, 66% collude and attack the chain, even if there's like 1 or 2 or 3 validators that are honest, they will realize that the chain is being attacked and they will broadcast it to the world. But beyond that, all of the DeFi projects running on top of Solana will run their nodes. All of the block explorers are running
so
nodes.
So like
they
expect the participants to somehow
nodes.
make them honest at some point.
Yeah. So their thing is like, it's a one of n problem, right? So detectability, as long as you have like 1 or 2 or 10 honest participants in the whole ecosystem of DeFi, block explorers, validators, you're going to be able to detect an attack. Now, if an attack happens, well, recovery from that attack is always social consensus. This is true in Ethereum, Solana, Starkware, wherever. You cannot run out of social consensus in a moment of attack. But what Solana says is it's fine that people can't run home nodes because, well, these DeFi projects, these block explorers, the Solana Foundation, 1800 validators, some of these people will detect it and will raise the alarm. Now, to many, this is a good enough answer, and that is why they build on Solana. To others, this is not a good enough answer. They want to be able to run nodes at home. It's fine. Now, what Starkware does is, so there's a division in the community. There are many for which this is fine. There are many for which this is like not fine. What Starkware does is it unifies these two types of people. So in Starkware, professional validators can run the chain, and in the leadership stock, Eli Ben Sassoon's talk, their idea is by the end of this year, they want to run like 500 transactions a second, which
sounds like Solana's type of bandwidth.
Yeah. So Solana today processes 500 transactions a second on average. This is not peak capacity, but average utilization. So Starkware has a similar ambition at the end of the year. But what Starkware can do is something very fascinating. It is the thing that when these professional validators are running 500 transactions a second, they can stream to the home user not all the transactions per se, but a cryptographic proof that the accounting done by the validators is mathematically correct. So the home user can receive this kind of like stream of proofs, and the home user can run this stream of proofs very quickly, and it requires low bandwidth to receive these proofs. And the home validator, the home node is sure the accounting is correct. And if something goes wrong, the home node can detect it. Now, an even more extreme version of Starkware's capability is this other chain called Mina. We run a validator for the Mina chain. And in Mina, it's like you don't even need to receive a stream of proofs. You need to receive one single proof, which is like, 2 tweets in size. And that single proof, if you run on your home computer, you know that the accounting of that entire Mina chain is correct and it has not been attacked. This is the crazy power of this zero knowledge technology, right? Like, because it can unify professional validation, which can blare out lots of transactions a second, and home nodes, which can verify that accounting. The Starkware is like that. Now this has very interesting consequences. So I think it's still going to take 2 or 3 years to perfect this technology. But this has radical consequences. So one of the radical consequences is when you have two kind of Starkware chains, or let's say you have a Mina and a Starkware, or two Starkware chains, and they want to bridge to each other. So what they can do is, if you have chain A and B that are bridging to each other, when you have professional validators in B processing lots of transactions, they can stream their proofs to chain A, and chain A can verify the proofs that chain B's accounting is correct, and vice versa. So imagine that instead of we are thinking like home nodes will verify the stream of proofs. That's true, but also chain can verify each other's stream of proofs. So what when that happens, well, what starts to happen is if you have A and B, the bridge between A and B is ultra secure. Because if A is hacked, B immediately knows because its stream of proofs will be compromised. And if B is hacked, A immediately knows. And so any kind of falsely printed assets can never move over the bridge at all. This is the power of this world. It's ultra secure bridges, right? The second thing is, well, if you're running a home node, well, if you're a user like me, I'm a CTO of a blockchain startup, but when I do my own transactions, I trust the block explorer. If it says my thing is confirmed, I say it's confirmed. I don't bother with running a home node myself. If you're like that, Starkware is the same. But if you're a user who cannot trust the block explorer for your accounting, well, you can get the stream of proofs from Starkware, and you can be completely sure that what the block explorer is telling you is the truth. So home users have a great deal. When blockchains bridge to each other, they are ultra secure by default. So now the question starts. Now when you look at this technology and you think of the Ethereum main chain, Ethereum main chain is saying that when Starkware confirms transactions, we will also verify the stream of proofs on Ethereum, so that we have a secure bridge to the L2 to Starkware. And what Ethereum is expecting to happen in this case is, people are going to value settlement, meaning that, okay, something happened on Starkware and then Ethereum confirmed that it verified the proofs, and people are going to value that confirmation. My kind of issue with this is, I don't value Ethereum's confirmation, because if I am that paranoid a user, many users are not paranoid. They will trust the block explorer. For them, it doesn't matter. If you're a paranoid user, well, you can actually run a home node or verify the proofs on your mobile.
Exactly.
You don't need Ethereum to tell you that Starkware's accounting is correct. And so this is why I think like the idea that like Ethereum is some kind of like settlement layer, it's not a very satisfying idea. Now, and the thing is, like, giving up your DeFi ecosystem for this direction, that is why it feels a little, I mean, not wrong, but it at least feels like something where I ought to raise questions, let's say. And I hope Vitalik someday will come and answer these questions.
Explore this a little bit. So what happens, let's assume that the Starkware evolution goes really well. Now liquidity, economic activity starts to migrate away, potentially to chains like Starkware. What does that world look like for Ethereum? Because you mentioned also about liquidity being a key. Liquidity essentially trumps security, right?
Yeah. So that's a soundbite, and it's like very easy to misinterpret that soundbite. I wish I had not made that soundbite.
Let's try to clarify what you mean by that.
Yeah. What I really mean by that. So if you imagine what's the Cosmos world today? There are chains. They are run by professional validators. There are bridges to these chains. But when attacks happen, well, assets can move over bridges, and then those malformed assets must be dealt with in the receiving chain. That's the Cosmos world today. What is coming is like this Stark world or ZK world, where there are chains, bridges connect them, but security is upgraded in a way that even if one of the chains is attacked, assets cannot move over bridges. Bridges are ultra secure by default. So you can think of it as like this upgrade is going to upgrade, this zero knowledge upgrade is going to upgrade like many chains in the Cosmos
Yeah.
ecosystem and Cosmos and Ethereum ecosystems. So the security story is actually very good. By default, the path
Yeah.
that this industry is on, the security story is extremely good. Now, when the security story is extremely good, actually, I think security is no longer a differentiator. Users stop worrying about the security of the chains on which their assets lie. So in this world where like users even today, but even more in the future, stop worrying about security and 66% attacks and things like that. In that world,
Yeah.
what do users start to really care about? That's the question, right? Because whatever users care about a lot, whatever chain supplies that element really well, that's actually going to be the winning chain or chains. And so in imagining this world, my hypothesis is decentralized exchange liquidity is what users and dApps will care about a lot. And so kind of to take a step back and kind of explain what this is. So one of the things worth noticing in crypto is as a user, if as a user or if you're running a corporation, if you're running a validator, think about all of the activities that you do. When I think about all of the activities I do, every workflow I do involves an exchange of some kind. So, I mean, what are examples? Well, I run a business, Chorus. It makes money in these various different tokens, crypto tokens. And my immediate thing is, okay, as soon as revenues are made, I need to liquidate them into dollars or other coins. I need to maintain a portfolio. Exchange is needed. I need to pay employees. Exchange is needed. When we are running a price oracle like Chainlink, well, where does the oracle get the price from? Well, it gets it from the exchange. And Uniswap is going to be an amazing price oracle, as Vitalik says. When I open up a CDP in Maker, I usually do it so that I can get leverage on an exchange. When I do an ICO, I'm usually doing it on Binance. Like if I can do a traditional Binance ICO, which is again exchange, or I could do a Uniswap ICO that is also coming up. That's again exchange, because if you're launching a new coin, exchange is needed. In the traditional world, IPOs are done in the New York Stock Exchange. So actually, no matter what successful crypto app you think of, right? Like if you think of Yearn for portfolio management, it needs exchange. If you think of, I don't know, like synthetics, need exchange. So exchange, the phenomenon of exchange, the workflow step of exchange is a part of every complex DeFi transaction that you do. Like where you're doing 3 or 4 things together, we're bundling 3 or 4 things together, exchange is going to be there. And actually, this is not just the nature of crypto, but this is also the nature of traditional finance. So in traditional finance, what you see is some cities are financial hubs like New York, Frankfurt, Mumbai, Shanghai. And you will almost always see the largest exchange of some legal jurisdiction being physically in that location. So biggest stock exchange of US, legal jurisdiction, New York, like that. And then you will also notice that, okay, actually all the investment banks locate right next to the biggest exchange, because the main thing that powers an investment bank are the trading desks. Customers come to investment banks for private wealth management or derivatives, and then their requirements are translated into trading calls, and their
Yeah.
trading desks then interface with the exchange and make those trading calls. So actually, exchange is like a center of finance in TradFi.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is crypto mirrors that pattern. So if you go and look at Cosmos, you can see it very obviously in all ecosystems, right? Like the biggest number of transactions, now value of money in Ethereum, Solana, Cosmos, Zilliqa, all of these
Yeah.
ecosystems
Yeah.
is actually going through the winning exchange, even Avalanche. So exchange is kind of like the center, and the nature of exchange is it benefits from scale. The bigger an exchange is, the better prices it can offer, because the bigger an exchange is, the more liquidity it has, the better prices it offers. So in a world, in this zero knowledge world, and even this Cosmos world, my investing hypothesis is whatever chains are going to host the biggest exchange liquidity, decentralized exchange liquidity, they are the chains everyone wants to connect to and run very secure bridges to. And then once they are so imagine they have some big massive winning exchange in this internet of blockchains. Everyone connects to that with a secure bridge. And then because everyone is connected to like this kind of chain,
Yeah.
people will buy services from that chain, other types of services from that chain naturally. And so that is going to be the major winner. And so this
Yeah.
is why I say liquidity trumps security.
Yeah.
Our security story by default is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whichever chain wins the
Because
liquidity story
you were
is going to be the
already
kingmaker.
extrapolating and saying that the context of security is maturing. So essentially all that's left is liquidity, and that is what
Yes.
will cause the value of a
Yes.
particular L1 or token or L2 to be extremely valuable.
Yes. 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 And then when you think of like Ethereum's path, which is
Yeah.
they have Uniswap, which is the winning DEX today. But their path is to encourage Uniswap to go somewhere else. And Uniswap is already setting up satellite trading networks on like 6 or 7 chains. And each of these chains has paid Uniswap
Yeah.
between 10 and 25 million to set up a satellite trading network there. You realize, oh, maybe, just maybe the roadmap.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize you want to ask questions about the roadmap.
Yeah.
And that's where I am.
Yeah. I think that actually puts a lot of context to where we stand in Ethereum. I think if I could describe it, it's almost as if like Ethereum is, okay, maybe it's not being stated apparently or overtly, but it sounds like Ethereum is somewhere between a rock and a hard place. And it's so mechanically, it has to deal with the L2s, but from a narrative standpoint, it's having to deal with, say, this money narrative. So it's, on the spectrum that you describe, it's almost always in between on every spectrum. Of course, with the mechanical level, it's moving more towards Cosmos.
Yeah.
And at the narrative level, now it's moving, it's saying, okay, we can actually compete with Bitcoin. So from a positioning standpoint, it's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. 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 Yes, yes. So actually, so yeah. So now imagine that the center of
Yeah.
liquidity, center of DeFi moves someplace out of Ethereum, and well, Ethereum doesn't have that killer advantage anymore. Now imagine that, okay, this settlement and data availability story doesn't prove to be that powerful, which I suspect will happen, but you know, the future can surprise us in various ways. But
Yeah.
let's say it doesn't. In any case, it's an R&D project. Let's say it doesn't become big. Then in that world, what is Ethereum's major value proposition? Actually, store of value or moneyness is the major value proposition. And this is why I start to see already like the Ethereum community pivoting in that direction. They anticipate, I think, subconsciously the weakness of the roadmap, and they are pivoting towards this kind of moneyness store of value narrative. It may work, but I think there's danger there too. I think there's danger there too. Um, but I think like my thoughts are even more unconventional and radical
Do you
when it
mind
comes to
just
that topic.
delving or sharing a little bit?
So yeah, yeah. So okay. So I think like the future of the crypto industry. I think what I think will happen is every network that tries to be money, at least in the next 20 or 25 years, I think is going to end up failing. Well, I mean, failing or being outcompeted by other chains that provide different kinds of value, like an exchange or like a decentralized exchange. Now,
Yeah,
what this is going to
this is
mean,
just an
what I'm
exploration of
predicting is
ideas. It
something
doesn't
radical.
mean
What
that
I'm
you are,
predicting is,
despising or hating or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what I'm really saying is, I
Yeah.
expect to see Bitcoin below the top 10 in coin market cap. And if money becomes the central narrative for Ethereum,
Mm-hmm.
I await a similar
Why
fate for Ethereum too.
can I just ask like why?
Okay, so
Because
now
there's
why?
on one hand there's this big narrative saying
Yeah,
fix the money, fix the world. There's $100 trillion sitting. Why would clearly?
yes,
I mean, a lot of people will say
yes,
clearly there is a
yes,
big space for it.
yes, clearly, yes, clearly. There's a big space for it, isn't there? Yes. So, like in this story,
Sure.
like let's focus on Bitcoin because Bitcoin has really pursued this story um, for many years, right? It started off as a payment system. I mean, Satoshi's white paper is like about payments,
Yeah.
but it ended up becoming about store of value / money. Um, and so actually, like I've spent 2 years of my life entirely convinced that oh, Bitcoin is an amazing store of value. And I come from India
Yeah.
where we see 8 or 9% inflation
Yeah.
everywhere. And I was like, oh, Bitcoin is my safe haven. And I want to
Uh-huh.
convince everybody to convert their money into this
Yeah.
one. I've spent 2 years there, right? Um, now, actually, a few things start to happen. So one is like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what are the features of good money?
Yeah.
Well, money is like a unit of account, which means like money is
Yeah.
usually something where in which you price other things, right?
Yeah.
A money is usually like a good medium of exchange. which means like trade. When you're doing trade, you want to give that
It's
thing and you want
costly to
receive
create.
other
It's
goods
also
in return.
scarce. Those are also elements of
And
money.
then
Costly to create.
it's scarce. Yes, it's scarce. Costly to create. I mean, I think maybe it can be bundled against in scarcity, right? Like it's costly to create, so that's like what might make it scarce. And then it's a store of value, right? Which to me means that when you want to store something for the long horizon, right? Like 5 years, 10 years, relatively low risk, then that's the thing you hold, because you are confident that 10 years later other people will sell their labor to you because you have that thing. So I mean, like, those are the features of kind of money, right? Now in all of these things, it's like very early on I was like, I realized that unit of account, well, that's really hard. Crypto is nowhere near being a unit of account. And the reason unit of account is the hardest feature to replicate in a crypto coin, because unit of account needs massive behavioral change at the societal level. It's like, I tend to think of my wealth in US dollars, even as a crypto person. I have to stop doing that and like start thinking in like Bitcoin or Ether or something. And then I have to price everything according to that. Until this day, whenever I look at the Bitcoin ETH trading chart, all of those numbers, 0.04, 0.03, they make no sense. Like, so, but unit of account is like, okay, to be unit of account, you need to induce that change not just in me, but like in everyone around me, in the entire society. That is genuinely hard. That is genuinely like 30, 40 years away, even if like the money trajectory of crypto is the correct one. Okay, so that's there. Now, medium of exchange. So medium of exchange, in the beginning, I actually tried personally to use crypto as medium of exchange, paying for coffees and things like that. There were a few shops that accepted, and I always tried. What I started to notice happening is, like, at one level there was like tech. At one level there were technological scaling difficulties. Payment systems proved hard. But the other thing I noticed is actually
the
US
emergence of
dollars
stable
started to get
coins.
printed on the blockchain, USDC, and I start to know, stable coins, and I start to notice that even in crypto, it's like when I'm investing in crypto, right? Like I'm fundraising a startup, funding a startup, funding an ICO, whatever I'm doing, I'm actually using USDC as a medium of exchange. As a medium of exchange, what people want is USDC. And it's even very hard for when you're investing in an Ethereum DeFi project, even like giving Ether is often hard. You have to give USDC. So medium of exchange, like US dollars are coming on the blockchain, and like actually they are succeeding as the medium of exchange, which is why Tether and UST, when it was there, and USDC, they are in the top 10 of crypto. Those three coins are right there. And at some level, both Bitcoin and Ethereum, they are failing to scale their payment system capabilities. So medium of exchange is hard. Both have a technological level, but also it's like USDC is really winning in that medium of exchange. So you start to think, okay, store of value. Store of value is amazing, right? Like, in store of value, you think, oh, okay, actually the fact that Bitcoin has 21 million units is brilliant. And actually, store of value actually ties in with the two things you added, scarcity, right? Because it's 21 million, that is why there's supply limitation. That is why
But
we
not
believe,
just
okay, this
because
can be a
it's
good store of
scarce,
value.
right? It's also costly to create that supply.
Costly to create that supply.
Because you could have certain commodities that are finite,
Yeah.
but inexpensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll be honest, I haven't
Yeah.
thought of this dimension. I
That's
haven't
fine.
thought of
That's
this
fine.
dimension. So you'll have to excuse me there. So what I have thought about is like, okay, it's 21 million. It's like fungible, it's transportable, transport costs are relatively low. So store of value. Bitcoin is a store of value. And many people actually believe in, many Bitcoiners believe in that narrative. Something mind-blowing happened when EIP 1559 happened in Ethereum, which is that Bitcoin came with saying, okay, 21 million, my supply limit is 21 million. Ethereum initially came and said, we start off with like 90 million and we can go to 200 million. That's what the initial roadmap said. And then when they hit 115 million or something like that, I think coins, Ethereum switched on EIP 1559, where it said that, okay, the Ethereum network is collecting transaction fees, and effectively we are going to use these transaction fees to retire coins, right? So the supply of Ethereum could even start decreasing. And then Ethereum is like now moving to proof of stake. And so the costs of operating that network are going to go down. And so Ethereum supply is now going to fall. And so Ethereum saying, Bitcoin, you are still inflating because you are at 19.5 million. You're still going to go to 21 million. I am harder than you are. I'm going to fall in supply. So, okay, so Ethereum says that. Now, but notice something here though. The reason Ethereum can fall in supply is because Ethereum has a winning business model today. Right? It has a winning product today and winning business model today. That product is hosting smart contracts, and the business model is collecting transaction fees for people interacting with these smart contracts. So it's using its winning business model and product to reduce its supply and become even harder money, even harder store of value than Bitcoin. Now, so now you start to think actually like, okay, store of value. So if Ethereum ends up flipping Bitcoin and becoming the store of value, what it will paradoxically demonstrate is actually when you have a strong business model, you can become even harder money, and you can become a better store of value, right? So the next generation of chains are going to come and say, we will have even better business models and we will become even harder than Ethereum. Ethereum declines at 0.5% a year.
Imagine if
That's
Solana
nothing. We'll
did that,
decline
for
at 2%
example.
a year because we have a better business model. That's going to happen. Yes, this is the natural trajectory of the store of value narrative. And so in the limit, in the equilibrium, when everybody is trying to reduce their supply by having strong business models and strong products.
Yeah.
What are these coins
Yeah.
really? These coins
Yeah.
are a form of equity because this is what companies do. Companies build a product, they have
Yeah.
profits, and when
Which
they have
is what
profits,
is
they
happening
buy
with
back their
the
shares
burning of
in the
tokens
market.
or coins and
And this is,
reducing of supply and yeah.
yes, yes, this is reducing a
Mm.
supply. So the store of value narrative taken to its logical limit is an indication that actually
Mm.
all of these coins are actually behaving like equity, meaning these networks have a product, have a business model, they earn coins, and they use those earnings to retire their supply. So you start to think, oh, actually, like these coins
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
see on coin market
Yeah.
cap, like not the USDCs, not the USDs, but the other coins, they are kind of like equity. And then actually a more beautiful picture starts to emerge of store of value, which is that if these coins are equity and they have successful business models, then an index of these coins with successful business models, an index fund of these
Probably a
crypto
better
equity,
store of value. Yeah, okay.
is the most amazing store of value
Mm.
because you are betting on human ingenuity now, right? You are no longer betting on some kind of Mad Max scenario where hyper Bitcoinization happens or governments
Hyperinflation.
fall down and store of become well. No, you are
Yeah,
betting
yeah. Mm.
you are no longer betting on these Mad Max scenarios, hyperinflation, hyper Bitcoinization, governments falling. What you are rather betting on is saying, well, the crypto community has enormous ingenuity. They will keep figuring out newer and better business models for crypto networks. And if I own an
Store of
index of
value.
this,
Understood.
that's the ultimate store of value. Yeah, yeah. And if I die and if I'm like cryonically frozen and I need to store my wealth for 50 years before they wake me up, well, I
Yeah.
want to own an index
Yeah.
of successful crypto business model networks, right? And so I think like like that is where we are headed, and it's not a bad future. It's actually a
Mm.
future which celebrates our ingenuity, and it provides a store of value. I think the medium of exchange and unit of account problems are unsolved, and they do not
Yeah.
have very natural solutions. And Ether doesn't have a natural solution to it either. Like, how does from this point Ether become a medium of exchange if it's going to limit transaction capacity or become a unit of account? But in store of value, paradoxically, to keep winning
Yeah.
at store of value, it needs to have even better business models. So I tend to think a roadmap focusing on moneyness
Yeah.
is weak to competition from the
You mean
next
version
network
2
that is
competition,
going to
right?
have an even stronger business model. So version 2 competition. So I think you cannot run away. You
Yeah.
cannot run away from having a strong product.
Yeah. I think that gives us a very good juncture to come to an end to this podcast. And I'd like to thank you so much for taking your time to join us today.